Hey, it's Mike here, and today, Game of Thrones star Peter Dinklage no longer being vegan, or really, as he says, vegetarian. So this is an interesting case of how somebody in the media becomes vegan when it doesn't appear that they ever really were. He made it onto several lists of famous vegans, which is really interesting. Many of you requested a response to this, and you might be wondering, why do I even care at this point if random celebrities are vegan or not? Well, I do like studying ex-vegans, ex-vegetarians, I guess, too, in this case, just to learn from them, and we can look at his story, we can look at his logic for quitting, and I will say it's definitely has some holes in it. But that being said, I think he did a great job as an actor with Tyrion Lannister. I am a Game of Thrones fan. I got my House Vegan shirt on, read the books, all of that stuff. So let's just look at what's going on here. Let's go. And lightning fast, I do just want to mention that my vegan Costa Rica trip has officially gone live today. It's going to be January 28th to February 4th, and it's gonna be very similar to the last trip because that one filled up and a lot of people didn't get to go, and we had such a good time, ate so much good vegan food, saw sloths, a bunch of nature, all that stuff. And so you can just click the link below and check that out. So we recently went on a podcast called The Flagrant Podcast and flagrantly said that he eats meat when asked about the subject. And for some background for the clip you're about to see, yeah, Game of Thrones was largely filmed in Croatia, in Dubrovnik. That's where King's Landing was, and a bunch of other sites. And we're gonna look into the details on that. I mean, it's a very beautiful place, but here he is.
But you don't eat meat.
I think I've been to 4.
I do now. You know why? Because of Thrones. I started eating fish and chicken again on that show.
Why?
Because the vegetarian in Croatia,
It's impossible. You cannot do it.
Yeah, really tired on set, and I was like.
So yeah, despite several sites claiming that he went vegan in 2014 or whatever they are claiming, he says straight up, yeah, I was vegetarian and I'm no longer vegetarian. The guy says it's impossible, kind of puts those words in his mouth, but then he agrees. And yeah, there weren't any Impossible Burgers around in Dubrovnik in 2011, which is when they started filming at that location. But does his logic hold up, especially for vegetarian? Well, it appears that he wasn't immediately offered vegetarian options on set. Not sure if he told the crew and everything that he was vegetarian. Maybe there was a language barrier that he perceived there.
Vegetarian, you see
but he just decided, I'm gonna give up right then and there. But I have a couple points for people that are in these situations that really don't want to quit, even if they're vegan and not vegetarian, which is obviously significantly easier. And that is, first of all, you can just look around and ask around about restaurants. There wasn't Happy Cow then, which shows vegan restaurants, but it's very clear that in 2011, there was a fully vegetarian restaurant. Now we have the reviews on TripAdvisor, and going further, we even have this 2009 video of a guy going to this vegetarian restaurant and eating.
It's impossible.
Yeah.
And you can see they've got like smoked seitan on the menu. A couple people have mentioned this restaurant existing, but they didn't go as far as to look at a map like this of all the filming locations, and especially that #1 filming location where they had the Red Keep is an 8-minute walk from this restaurant. Like, it seems to be pretty easy. There's also a little thing called falafel, widely available and vegan, and then apparently it's a big pasta culture, so probably could have gotten some pasta there as well. But then we also just have the fact that there was even vegan organizations that were active in Croatia in 2011 from this video, where a woman just casually orders soy milk. No, that's Animal Friends Croatia. They did like cooking expositions and stuff like that. So, if he was really trying to connect, maybe he could have connected with them. Clearly he wasn't. And you might be thinking, but he was trapped on set. They were probably providing food for him. Look, Game of Thrones had a budget of between $5 and $10 million per episode. I believe that he could have requested vegetarian food. Ryan from Happy Healthy Vegan has covered this in 3 videos, and he even mentioned as a musician years back, he would just request, no meat, and it was never a problem for much smaller little organizations or places with way smaller budgets than Game of Thrones.
I find this a little bit odd because he's a really famous actor, gets paid a lot, and actors on all levels, even on my little level, I'm not an actor, but I'm a musician, and I've had writers, like technical and food writer requirements that we send out to people who are taking care of us and hosting us to make sure we have food that fits our requirements. Like here, from a show that Love Spirals Downwards did in 1996 in Mexico City, you can see even way back then, Ryan doesn't eat any beef, poultry or pork.
And we'll talk about other cast members in a second who might have been vegan or vegetarian, but I want to say there are other tactics to remain vegan in situations like this. I, in 2014, was on a work trip in Peru multiple times, rural Peru, where nobody spoke any English. And what I did is I just learned the basic phrases of like sin queso, sin huevo, sin carne, and I was able to easily maintain being vegan and eat things like potato soup and rice and beans and vegetables, corn, papas fritas, which is potato wedges. So just Googling some Croatian phrases and writing them down probably would have prevented all of this. He also said, the term vegetarian, that's completely unheard of. Well, the Croatian word for vegetarian is similar enough that they probably would have just understood him if he said he was vegetarian. It's like vegetarianac, pretty much.
Vegetarianac. Vegetarianac.
Or just something like no meat, please, which would have been, after looking for 5 seconds, Bez Mesa Molim. I don't know if it would work. But then we can look to some just confusing timeline stuff, because it is the case that the reason that Peter Dinklage has become a known vegan or vegetarian is because he has been involved in videos talking about animal welfare, etc. He's touted all over the place as having been vegetarian for 15 years until he went vegan in 2014. And so this is just not making any sense. He's saying, perhaps in 2011 or 2012 or whatever, when he started filming, he quit. And then we have news of him becoming vegan, even on set. And then reports of him being fed actual vegan meat instead, when there was actually a scene with meat in it. And here's a video of him in 2014 talking about animal welfare.
I think it's so much easier now to become a veg than when I was young. There's so many more organic markets, soy products, restaurants. That's the funny thing. People think it's more expensive and harder to find, but it truly is less expensive and very easy to find. It's funny that children, some of their first words are animal names. To open them up to the dark side of that stuff is pretty terrible.
And then we have this Instagram post from 2022 on his actual account. It says, quote, "I like animals, all animals. I wouldn't hurt a cat or a dog or a chicken or a cow, and I wouldn't ask someone else to hurt them for me. That's why I'm vegetarian." And then 2 years later, right now, he's like, "Oh, I quit being vegetarian 13 years ago." Like, what? And it appears that he quit by eating fish and chicken as well, so I don't know how that chicken quote got in there anyway. And then, of course, that 2022 quote was 3 years after they stopped filming. Now, obviously, he could have just gone back to being vegetarian, but clearly there's more going on here. But I had to laugh at a comment under a plant-based news post about this saying, "Oh, I'm a Croatian and I'm vegan for 6 years and I've only been able to eat mud pies. Somebody please send help." So my best guess at what happened here was he was vegetarian for 15 years or so, and then on set in 2011 or 2012, he just didn't want to put the extra effort into maintaining vegetarian, so he stopped. And then it seems like there were some other co-stars on there that maybe in 2014 got him more excited, and he maybe was a little bit more vegan, but it seems like it's just flexitarian through and through since starting. But yeah, it was a case where people like Natalie Emmanuel, who is a very beautiful person, was vegan at least 8 years ago on set, and she was also in the same area. And then we have Jerome Flynn. These are people who are both verified vegan people that said they're vegan. We had Natalie Emmanuel go for health reasons. She got rid of her migraines, but then she's doing animal rights related things. And then Jerome Flynn is also doing interviews talking about animal rights, talking about how he is vegan specifically.
I was always an animal lover, but we're not really educated to link the food on our plate to the animals that we love. Veganism suits me very well. I don't miss meat at all, and I feel great. I believe I'm healthier than most guys my age.
And Jerome Flynn's character was with Tyrion a ton. They were like a dynamic duo. Fine, maybe the first couple years, 2011, 2013, were harder. We can grant that still. There's no reason that he didn't just go back to it when these people were vegan on set with him. And after all that nitpicking, I just have to mention that Peter Dinklage, in advocating for people to eat less meat, probably still has like a negative animal impact based on his following, how many people he advocated this to, posting that he's vegetarian on Instagram to 4 million followers. That's no joke. I mean, if he just got like 4 or 5 people to go vegan, then yeah, he's saved a lot of animals. But it's still frustrating to just see such a really weak excuse. And so it continues because there's more to it as well. And it has to do with nostalgia. Here he is, back to that interview.
You know, my dad and I fished together, and I missed fish. And so, and you're right on the seaside there. So
you got to get after it.
And I said, I'll have a tuna steak. And it was just, that was it.
You remember?
But I don't eat the cow or the pork or that stuff.
Really?
Yeah, not since I was 16.
What about the poultry?
The last hamburger I had was McDonald's cheeseburger drive-thru when I was 16.
If you're somebody that cares about animals and you care about fish, you are sentient, this kind of comes off a little bit like, oh, well, my dad actually used to just like hit the dog. So, for nostalgia, I decided to just perform some dog abuse, that's sort of the same logic. So from my perspective, I'm going, why consume a sentient animal? If you really just want a little bit of taste of the fishing experience, maybe just watch a fishing video or go and see some people fishing, probably people fishing in Croatia. You wouldn't add to the impact of animals being killed that way. Personally, my experience of fishing was my friend's dad whacking a fish on the head with a hammer repeatedly as it wouldn't die, scarring like 4 or 5 children at once. So I don't know what his experience was though. Also, he says he added chicken. So like for nostalgia, why add the chicken? I don't think his dad was fishing for chicken, which is a ridiculous image. But zooming out here, what do I think actually happened? I think it was more of a situation of social and cultural pressure. He didn't want to fight it. He was probably focused on his lines, etc. And so he just caved. And that's just another example where people might say, oh, being vegetarian or vegan is flawed, but it's quite clear that if everyone that was surrounding him was eating vegan, he wouldn't have just decided to then be the only person to eat fish, for example. So yeah, another example of how people end up quitting these types of diets just because there's a resistance in sort of fighting the world of non-vegan people around them, which is why I'm all about, creating surroundings that are more vegan options, environments, because whether you're an environmental activist or whatever, fighting against the grain is exhausting to an extent. And that's why I think a lot of people just end up quitting. And I will say this is another case where somebody didn't quit for health reasons. And this is good to remember because everyone's saying, oh, a vegan diet is flawed for health reasons. Well, we have to look to this Faunalytics report, for example, on ex-vegans, where 70% of people didn't even put health as a major reason for quitting. And so we have just a huge mix of things, including social pressures, which we're seeing here. So yeah, he had some social or professional pressure and then just didn't have the drive to fight it. I think I made a strong case for why he could have still been vegetarian. He probably could have gotten delivery from that restaurant, probably asked around, found another vegetarian person in that city. Clearly there was one, like he could have made it happen. And I haven't even touched on several other Game of Thrones people that are animal rights activists or in and out vegetarians like Lena Headey, for example, Maisie Williams, etc. Like clearly this would have been pretty easy, especially after the first couple years. But now it's been like 5 years or so since Game of Thrones wrapped, and he is still using this as an excuse. So that's kind of strange. And I think a more appropriate headline from the articles that I've seen would have been, Peter Dinklage quit being vegetarian 13 years ago. It's like, this is just such a weird story in that sense. This is why I keep saying don't put too much stock in celebrities being vegan. They're just people that make decisions on a whim. And it's funny because he was even somebody that I put in my book as somebody that has been vegetarian or vegan, and that's a familiar face, but under it I put an asterisk like, you shouldn't care too much about this, but it's just, interesting to look at. So thanks, Peter. Now I have to release a whole new edition of my level 5 vegan guide for long-term vegans book. So yeah, in the end, his logic was not persuasive. Vegans have gone through way more challenges and remained vegan. I think that me being in Peru, for example, was probably harder, as a vegan than him being a vegetarian on the set of a, multi-million-dollar per episode show. So I think that if Peter was just exposed to some more like fish sentience content and seeing how much damage fishing does to the ocean as the leading cause of whale deaths, and fishing nets are essentially half of the larger debris in the Pacific garbage patch. I mean, there's a lot of negative impacts of fishing. Anyway, if you do want to travel as a vegan and not even worry about being vegan in another country at all, of course you can hop on the Costa Rica trip. Hopefully it's not full already after posting this or by the time you're watching this, but the link is right there below. And of course you can sign up to be notified rarely about new upcoming trips as well if you can't make it. But of course, let me know down below what you think about all of this. I think it's a little bit frustrating, but we do need to remember that, Peter still at least advocated for animals, which is better than most people can say. So yeah, feel free to like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.